Thank you so much, everyone, for joining the African Languages Conference. This is our very first session of the conference. We just had the opening ceremony a few minutes ago, and it was amazing. So this is the third edition of the African Languages Conference. We organized it in 2023 and 2022. And as I mentioned during the opening ceremony, the highlights for me for this particular event is the fact that we have it in our African languages, not only in English and French. So it's truly amazing. So this conference is organized by myself. My name is Adina Maran Kulibali. I work with Bolingo Consults. My co-organizers are Avishta Sirius from Lingua Cultura Experience, Christian Elonge from Cabot Group. We have a sponsor, Hybrid Links, and then we have the support of the African Academy of Languages. This event is meant to celebrate the African Languages Week and also to celebrate our African languages, our diversity, and everything that we stand for as Africans. And so we are truly glad that you are able to make it to this conference. It's also live on Facebook. I'll share the link as well for those who want to share it with their network. You can share the Facebook live link. I'll also share our social media handles. Thank you once again for joining this particular conference. I'll give the floor to our speaker here to introduce herself and to also give us a description of her session and what she'll be talking about. Thank you very much.
Asante. Habari gani wa Afrika wenzangu? Kwa majina ninaitwa Nduku Mulumba. Asili yangu ni nchi ya Kenya, lakini wakati huu niko nchi ya Marekani. So kwanza ningependa kusema asante kwa kupata nafasi hii ya kushirikiana nanyi kuhusu umuhimu wa Kiswahili na asili yake, nje ya maelezeo ambayo yametolewa na wakoloni. Ingekuwa bora kama ningeweza kuelezea maoni yangu yote katika lugha ya Kiswahili, lakini bado hatujafika hapo. Lugha ya Kiswahili haijaenea kwa mapana ya Afrika kokote Waafrika waliopo. Idadi kubwa ya Waafrika duniani kote hawaelewi Kiswahili, na ni muhimu wasikie maoni yetu ili waone umuhimu wa lugha hii yetu ya umoja na wafanye juhudi kujifunza haraka iwezekanavyo. Sisi wanajumuiya wa jumuiya ya Nguzo Saba tunatarajia kuwa hivi karibuni sisi Waafrika wote tutaweza kuwasiliana katika lugha ya Kiswahili kokote tuendapo Afrika na duniani kote. So I am sorry for those who did not understand what I said. Hopefully, eventually when you get the recording, if you do, you'll be able to get the translation. Most of my presentation is based on my personal relationship with Kiswahili as a mwenyeji, and my observation of its relation to other African languages, popularly known as Bantu languages, having been in relationship with them too, as a Mkamba in community with fellow Africans of the Kikuyu, the Meru, the Luganda, the Shona, the Nkosa, and the Zulu peoples, among the many other Bantu peoples. Growing up in Kenya, I was lucky enough to go to school in different areas of Kenya where I encountered peoples of Kenya who spoke different languages, a lot of them being Bantus. It is in hearing the very many similarities to Kiswahili in these languages that we at Jumuiya ya Nguzo Saba concluded that Kiswahili must be an African language. It must be an African tongue. I remember the first time I heard the Congolese Kiswahili way of counting, I sat back and wondered, I know, given my relationship with African languages, that we are very literal people. Like, we say it as it is. So here I am encountering Kiswahili, and the number hamsini, which is Kiswahili Sanifu, that is standard Kiswahili, is makumi matano. And therefore, to me, I saw that this must be the original way these people who created these languages chose to call this number. And therefore, there must have been an infection that came in by the Arabic that took away that original way of saying makumi matano and brought in hamsini, the Arabic infection. And we at Jumuiya ya Nguzo Saba are calling it an infection because we have Kiswahili that was well, and then now it is in all kinds of forms to the point where Africans can't even recognize it. And therefore it is ill and has an infection. I'll start my presentation now. Can you see it? Someone just let me know because I can't see the video anymore.
Not yet. We can't see your
Oh,
presentation.
because I'm not sharing. I'm sorry about that.
Okay.
Because I'm not sharing. I have to do that first, don't I?
Yeah.
All right, we can see it now?
Yes. Thank you.
And it looks good. And just want to hide this. So that I have control of my screen. Bear with me. There we go. All right. So again, I am a member of Jumuiya ya Nguzo Saba. We are an organization, a community, currently based in the US, but a global community of Swahili-speaking people. We are grounded on the 7 principles of Kwanzaa, but literally on Ubuntu, the fact that I am because you are, and knowing that every action that we take affects our fellow human beings and vice versa. We'll start with, let me just put this down. There we go. All right, so Kiswahili ni lugha ya Kibantu. Let's just state that from today on, Kiswahili ni lugha ya Kibantu. No more arguments as to whether Kiswahili is Arabic or African. Kiswahili ni lugha ya Kibantu. There's a saying that has been going around East Africa for years now. Kiswahili was born in Tanzania. It got sick in Kenya and it died in Uganda or Congo, some people say. Now, look at the map I'm showing you all right now and tell me whether you see Kenya, Tanzania, or Congo in that map. But you can see Bantu-speaking people located in different areas that eventually are called Kenya, Tanzania, Uganda, and Congo, right? Kiswahili, how could the fact that Kiswahili is an Arabic language be true, or that it started in Tanzania, got sick in Kenya, and died in Congo or Uganda be true if there were no borders at that time, right? So we could not designate where Kiswahili started at that time. The Berlin Conference had not even happened. The Berlin Conference started in November 1884 and ended in February 1885. Kiswahili had started way before that. So we know the borders come into Africa once the Berlin Conference starts. And therefore, we cannot say that Kiswahili started from Tanzania, got sick in Kenya and died in Uganda or Congo. And given the fact that I talked about the Makumi Matano and how similar it is to the way we speak, therefore then the evidence is there that Congo did not kill Kiswahili. So it's about time we stop spreading that rumor. David P.B. Masamba in his book Historia ya Kiswahili 50 BK hadi 1500 BK says, katika kuvichunguza vyanzo vya kiisimu, tuliona kwamba lugha ya Kiswahili ina uhusiano wa karibu sana na lugha ya Kibantu. So it's very closely related to Bantu languages, lugha za Kibantu. Ingawa lugha hii ina maneno mengi kutoka lugha za kigeni, lakini msamiati wake wa msingi, its primary vocabulary, unapatikana pia katika lugha nyingine za Kibantu, is found in other Bantu languages. Muundo wake wa sarufi ni wa Kibantu, mfumo wake wa majina ngeli ni wa Kibantu, mfumo wake wa morfolojia ni wa Kibantu, mfumo wake wa fonolojia ni wa Kibantu na kadhalika. Uhusiano huu muhimu ndio uliowafanya wataalamu na mabingwa mbalimbali wa isimu kufikia hitimisho kwamba kwa kila hali lugha ya Kiswahili inafungamana sana na lugha nyingine za aina yake na ambazo kwa pamoja zimepewa lakabu ya lugha za Kibantu. So it is essentially a Bantu language because there's evidence. It's in the way the vocabulary is set up, in the speech patterns that match other Bantu languages. And again, as I said, as a Kamba speaker, and having gone to school with Kikuyus, Merus, Embus, once I came to the diaspora, met people from Nkosa, Shona, Luganda communities, I know that I could hear, every time we got together, I could hear similarities in Kiswahili in all these languages. And therefore I questioned, how could this be an Arabic language if there were so many similarities to African languages? We at Jumuiya ya Nguzo Saba, and I want to thank my brother, Jabali Ekevu, who's working on this analysis, have been doing some analysis to show the similarities between the different Bantu languages in Africa, and to give the evidence that shows that Kiswahili is truly, truly a Bantu language and an African language. We believe that once the peoples, as I showed you the map before, once the Bantu people settled in that area, Afrika Mashariki of Africa, they had to figure out a way of having one united language so that they can trade, so that they can intermarry, they can socialize, they can have a common spiritual practice, and so that they can have security for themselves. And in this way is how they formed Kiswahili. So I'm not sure if everyone can see clearly in the screen, the different languages that we have. But in his research, Mzee Masamba concludes that there is evidence in the other Bantu languages that Kiswahili, having so many Bantu words in it, is a Bantu language itself, despite the infection. Infection is our term, not his, the infection from foreign languages. And we know the foreign languages that end up infecting Kiswahili in Afrika Mashariki area is not just Arabic. You had Portuguese, you had German, you have English, and all these languages ended up infecting. As we continue the research, I have my brother calling me or sending me messages during the day and saying, hey, look at this word in Kiswahili that we use now in Kiswahili Sanifu. Isn't this a word in Farsi? Right? So things like that, because the Oman peoples settled in that, invaded that area. And because they took a position of power, they controlled everything that was going on in that area, including the languages. So we'll just look at number 1 to 5 to show the evidence that Kiswahili is indeed a Bantu language. You have number 1 here, Kiswahili. We have Lingala, Kishona, Kibundu, Kituba, Kikunda, Kichechewa, Kitumbuka, na Kibemba. In Kiswahili, we say moja for 1. In Kilingala, moko. In Kishona, motsi. Kibundu, mochi. Kituba, mosi. Mo, modzi. Chimoza, mo. All of them having that mo root in them, right? Number 2, in Kiswahili, we say mbili. In Lingala, mibale. In Zulu, kubili. In Kinyarandwa, kabiri. In Kirundi, kabiri. In Kunda, wili. Mbunda, vivali. Kali, mbiri, vibili, bili, bebale, mbiri, mbili, ili, iwili. Again, the root is there, and you can see the similarity in all those different Bantu languages. Number 3 in Kiswahili is tatu. You have in Lingala misato, katathu, tatu, gatatu, tatu, gatatu, tatu, tatu, vitatu. I mean, I don't know how much evidence you all need, Africans, for you to finally embrace this as your language, but I hope this is showing you that this really is your language, and it's about time we stop detaching from the language and claiming that we are not reclaiming it because it is an Arabic language, right? Number 4 in Kiswahili is nne. In Lingala, minei. In Zulu, kune. In Kinyarandwa, kane. Kirundi, kane. Kunda, nne. Luganda, nya. So you can see the similarity there too. In Kiswahili, number 5 is tano. In Lingala, mitano. Zulu, kulanu, shanu. Gautano in Kinyarandwa. Kibundu, tano. Kirundi, gatanu. Taanu, sano, vitanu, sanu, katano. You can see the evidence there. So again, if anyone ever asks you, and we will have this, our website is coming up soon, so we'll have all this there for you in case someone needs you to show them the evidence. Show me the evidence that Kiswahili is a Bantu language. You can send them to that website and they can see this. The colonial infection. So I didn't want to highlight the invaders in this presentation, but I figured, you know what, let's give both sides of the story. Let's show what they saw in us. And so therefore, Derek Nurse and Thomas T. Spear, in their observation of Kiswahili, the Swahili, reconstructing the history and language of an African society, 1800 to 1500, ethnohistory. First of all, it's 1800 to 1500. Kiswahili has already started before 800. So how exactly are you going to be talking about a language that started before you're writing about it and acting as if you're an expert in it? But I digress. They say that the Swahili language has undergone spectacular growth during the last century as a result of the language policies of the colonial and independent governments. And today it is spoken by more than 30 million people throughout Eastern Africa. And leave it to the colonial entities to feel like they're the ones who have given progress to Kiswahili. I would say that Kiswahili has experienced an infection, we would say that Kiswahili has experienced an infection as a result of the language policies of the colonial and neo-colonial independent governments. And any growth that Kiswahili has seen has been as a result of the East, Central, and Southern African peoples who maintained their Bantu mindset in this African language of unity, Kiswahili. You had the evidence in our speaker today, our main speaker, Ndugu Lang's presentation, how different, and before, during the opening ceremony, several Kenyans, and I'm so proud to hear several Kenyans stepping up and talking about how they're working on preserving and spreading Kiswahili, came up and said they're doing this, they're doing that, starting organizations to preserve. So it is our efforts that have sustained Kiswahili and preserved it, not anyone else's, not the colonial government. In fact, it's the contrary. The colonial government tried to destroy Kiswahili. I remember going to school in Kenya. I went to school in Kenya, where we were punished if we spoke other languages outside of English. You were required to speak English. And therefore, you can imagine what that does to a child. You're going to school for 8, 12 years, and you cannot speak your own African languages. In fact, you're shamed when you speak your African languages, because we had to wear this, I forget what it was called, but this wooden necklace, right? That showed that you were to be shamed because you had spoken outside of English. And therefore you associate shame with your African languages and you start detaching from it. So it's about time Africans came back to our African languages and take away that shame from our being. You all know Kenya was formerly colonized by the British, and its education system is still heavily influenced by the British. I was so disappointed to find out that throughout my school years, the Kenyan tests that we took, I hope it has changed now, were being sent to Britain to be evaluated, right? That's ridiculous. We as Africans are taking exams to determine our level of intelligence, of qualification, to move up to the next level, and it's being taken to our former colonial oppressor, I will say, to evaluate how well we did from an outside perspective, not from a cultural perspective, right? So I am looking forward to seeing us walk away from those practices. Is Kiswahili an Arabic pidgin language? So again, we're going to give both sides of the story. Mzee Masamba in Historia, the book. And for those of you who would like to get the book, it's in all Kiswahili. This is the book I'm talking about. It's in Kiswahili. He refutes both Mazrui's and Sharif's arguments that Kiswahili is a pidgin language that was created out of Bantu languages mixed with Arabic. Masamba points out that Mazrui and Sharif do not explain why this huge percentage of Arabic, which they claim words in Kiswahili, ended up being a small percentage compared to the Bantu influence, right? He also points out that they do not show the evidence why a founding language, in this case Arabic, would change its morphology and phonology to follow that of Bantu languages. So we were asking the question, how much did Kiswahili influence Arabic? We've all talked about, Arabic influence, because we've been brought up with this mindset that our culture is always the one affected, right? We are the subordinate. It's always them who are above us, and therefore it's them who are going to affect us. But no, maybe Kiswahili affected and infected and influenced Arabic. He points out that they claim to have used the sociolinguistic foundations of Kiswahili, both Mazrui and Sharif, to justify their conclusions, but the very same sociolinguistic foundation, as I showed in the evidence before prepared by our brother Jabali Ekevu, is evidence that Kiswahili is a Bantu language. So again, refuting their arguments, and we can bury them in history moving forward. The language, I could not do a presentation without pointing out our Mzee Ngugi wa Thiong'o. I just could not. I wish I had pointed out more of him, because he's done such great work in as far as African languages go. So language is a vehicle to culture. We've heard that. We recently had a talk with Dr. Kanyisile from South Africa, who told us the very thing, that language is the vehicle to culture, culture is the vehicle to our African spirituality. The three of them is our full African being. We have been detached from this and we must return to it. So Ngugi wa Thiong'o, in his book, Decolonizing the Mind, for those of you who wonder how the book looks like, this is the book, says that language, any language, but with his heart settling on African languages, right, has a dual character. It is both a means of communication and carrier, the vehicle of culture. And therefore, when you think about it, we have been detached from our culture. Language is the vehicle to our culture. You best all Africans get on that vehicle and go back to your culture. So just a side note, as Africans, we have been a lost people because we have been so far removed from our African cultures in the pursuit of Western culture, believing the false narrative that we are more intelligent, the better we speak, look, and behave like Westerners. I know I'll get heat, but that's okay. This is part of the work of decolonizing everything that we are doing, including our minds, is pointing out the colonialism in everything that we do, the way that we dress, the way that we talk, the way that we talk about ourselves, the way that we talk about the rest of the world. So this thing of Africans wanting to sound British, this thing of African wanting to sound American, this thing of Africans wanting to sound French. I remember when I first got here and I went back home after 10 years and I was told, you still sound Kenyan. I said, of course I still sound Kenyan. I'm Kenyan. Like, so we need to stop yearning to sound like those who colonized us and still oppress us. There is some psychological dysfunction going on there, and we need to come away from it and find some healing. These folk even duped us into believing that this African language, Kiswahili, of unity is not really ours, but belongs to the Arabs, therefore creating a hostility within us to our own language, right? So if I was a colonizer, if I ever was, God forbid, or any entity that wants to take power and dominance over our people of Africa, and I go to where they are and I realize that they are united by a common language. So I get to Afrika Mashariki and I see that they're getting along. They have this language. I can hear they speak different languages when they move away from each other, but when they're together, they have this language. And it sounds similar to the ones that they were speaking. And it seems like they get along when they speak this language. Of course, I'm going to take away that language so that I can sow disunity amongst them and make it easier to control them. So this is the very thing that the Arabs, I'm sorry to our keynote speaker, I have to say this, Arabic is not our language. Arabic is not an African language, 100% not an African language. It might be predominantly spoken in North Africa. It is not our language. It is the language of the invaders of those parts of Africa. And it was literally forced down our throats. People were killed if they didn't speak it. So we as Africans need to move away from that dysfunction of calling things that are not ours, right? To us Africans, this nature of exploitation and dominance is not inherently our way. So me assuming I was a colonizer, and maybe that is why it has taken us so long to see the deceptive ways of those who have invaded our motherland. Maybe that's why it's taking us so long to see Arabic as something that was forced on us and that is not ours, right? And the comfort of the fact that we have been speaking it, we don't know any history unless we read, we don't know any history beyond us speaking it, and the comfort where we don't want to move away from it. But the evidence shows that Arabic is not an African language. Where do we go from here? I had to take my hat off for Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and his question, right? Where do we go from here as Africans? Now that we know, now that we have identified the problem, we must put together a solution, right? We have learned that Kiswahili is our African language of unity, that it brought African peoples from different tongues together, one tongue for the sake of trade, social well-being and security. We had many, many other reasons, I'm sure. We have learned that there was deliberate action taken to infect the language and take it from us. So before the Arabs get there, Africans are not writing on paper. They're not recording their language on paper. The Arabs get there. And therefore, if they're going to be the ones controlling the writing, they're going to use their bias to do that. And it's going to influence what ends up on the paper, right? It's not going to hold you up as the African. In his book, Masamba also points out the fact that the people who came, especially the Westerners who came to Africa, always looked at African progress, right? The fact that Africans could have created a language, Africans could have created the pyramids, Africans could have created the Great Wall in Zimbabwe. They looked at that and they were like, nah, it can't be true, can't be true. Because they have to justify that these beings that they have found are not human. And therefore, there's no way they're going to acknowledge that these beings have human qualities, like advancing their civilization, right? So they took that away from them. And this is what they record, that it must be someone else. It must be the Arabs who created this language that these people speak. And we have believed that false narrative all these years. So to those who claim that learning Kiswahili will make them, I have my brothers and sisters from West Africa. Again, I am saying these things in love. This is the tough love that you all talk about. We cannot continue to cuddle each other and pretend that this is not happening because we don't want to hurt each other's feelings. When I speak to my brothers and sisters from West Africa and I tell them they need to learn Kiswahili, I've gotten some pushback from some of them because they claim if they learn Kiswahili, if we make Kiswahili the African language, it's going to take them away from their African languages, right? It will take them away from Yoruba. It will take them away from Hausa. It will take them away from Wolof. And I say to that, firstly, I don't see you fighting as hard against the colonial languages that you speak, right? Let's be honest with each other. We want to claim French, we want to claim Arabic, we want to claim English, but we don't want to claim Kiswahili. And secondly, myself and many other Africans started learning and speaking Kiswahili as children, and it never took away our mother tongues. No, nine na kikamba, no mundi. Na likasimu nina inyakwa nine na kikamba. That's me speaking Kikamba. I have not forgotten it, despite speaking Kiswahili all these years, right? And I speak fluently, despite my relationship with Kiswahili all my life. I have been able, like again, our speaker said, Ndugu Lang, that we are a multilingual people and are able to speak. See, now I'm doing the presentation and seeing spelling errors, but I digress. To speak multiple languages at the same time without taking away from one or the other. Oh, excuse me. So I also could not do the presentation without giving a nod to Ubuntu, right? I am because you are. The idea of communalism, the idea that you will act well so that your fellow human beings can be well. So let's take, for example, Ubuntu. And for those of you who follow me on Kumbukeni, I am a co-host there. You saw our show this past weekend that we had our guest, Dr. Nyaka Lagoke, who spoke about the philosophy of Ubuntu and showed the evidence in multiple languages, not just in Southern Africa, East Africa, Central Africa, but West Africa. The similarity of this word in different ways in all these areas, showing that this is a practice that is very African, not just South African, very African. It may be known as Ubuntu in Southern Africa, but it is known as many other things, but practiced everywhere else in Africa. So the spirit of being one with your fellow human beings and the environment, knowing that whatever action you take will affect others, as will theirs, you. And therefore you choose to be a responsible member of community who strives to always do what you can to contribute positively to the lives of fellow human beings and to your environment, which sustains you and your community. We talk about climate change. We want to talk about climate change and have conferences and all that, but we're not practicing in the spirit of Ubuntu. Yes, especially you, African leaders. You're not leading by example by living in the spirit of Ubuntu. You're selling African land to foreigners who are misusing it, right? African land should not be sold. African land should not be sold, especially to outsiders. So we need to return to our way of Ubuntu. The spirit, though called something different, like I said, is evident in many African tongues to be there and practiced by all Africans. There are things about protocol, things about how we interact with the environment, things about our relationship with the divine, the deities and our ancestors that are common throughout Africa. and are evident in all the African peoples' tongues and cultures. We've been far removed, again, I cannot say this enough, we've been far removed from this African being, the language, the culture, and the spirituality for so long that it may be difficult for most to see this connection between us, the similarities, right? We have Africans fighting on Clubhouse, we have African fighting in conferences, arguing about their differences instead of seeing how similar they are. We must reclaim our African being and return to this way so that we can heal the maafa that has been brought upon us, African people, and our land. I say our land and I think of Congo. That is maafa on the land itself. And if you do not think that land is living, then I don't know where you think your food comes from. And that act of ripping and pillaging the land constantly without giving back to her is traumatizing to the land. Kufunza na kujifunza Kiswahili. So again, Dr. King asks, where do we go from here? We must teach and learn Kiswahili. I was very happy to hear all these Kenyans come off mic and talk about they're doing this, teaching this, interpreting, translating, recording. We cannot continue to exist in a foreign tongue and culture far removed from our African being, right? When you go to Germany, again, our main speaker spoke about it. When you go to Germany, you'll find that everything is in German. This is the case in most of Europe, in European nations. When you go to China, everything is in Chinese. They have learned other foreign languages, but have maintained their own languages and cultures. This example is not for us to emulate them. Like I didn't give this example for us to say, okay, let's be like the white man because they did this, let's do this. No, it's for us to see that these people we try to emulate, they are not doing what we do. They are holding on to their languages and their cultures. So why are we trying so hard to be like them when it is destroying us? So the solution, again, we go back to BRICS, right? Africans currently think that BRICS is God-sent. The solution is not to take on Chinese or Russian cultures, no, or to speak Mandarin, or to start teaching Mandarin, or to start teaching Kung Fu and building Chinese buildings in Africa and changing your road signs into Chinese road signs. No, that's not the solution because that, again, is not our way of being, and it will still keep us away from our full African being. We must return to our original ways of being, not necessarily erasing progress, because Africans worry about that, right? What about the progress we've made? No, I'm not saying take away progress. I'm saying return, but wisely knowing what is aligned with our ways and what isn't, right? We have to analyze. We have to sit down together and say, what things have worked with us? What things are most aligned with the way of Ubuntu? What things are not? The things that are, we take on, and the things that aren't, we dump and walk away from. Jumuiya ya Nguzo Saba proposes that everyone, and I'm saying every single one, of the 54 African nations start teaching Kiswahili in their schools. Add Kiswahili to your curriculums. We propose that Kiswahili be the official language of doing business in the African Union. Non-Africans can get translators if attending joint meetings with the AU. They can. You go to the UN, you have translators. I see you all with your little mics. They can do the same when they come to Africa. And you know what? They can hire Africans to do the translation, creating jobs in Africa. I'm not sure when Africans were invited to the room. When were we invited to the room where the world decided that English was going to be the official language? I don't know. I mean, I'm being facetious, but we weren't. And therefore, why are we following along as if we were part of this decision that English is going to be the official language? At least we know with Kiswahili, there's evidence that peoples came together, worked jointly, and built a common language, right? We understand at Jumuiya ya Nguzo Saba that it's a journey to go back and reclaim our language, but we must start now. We can no longer delay it. The evolution of Kiswahili going forward. So how are we as stewards of Kiswahili, as the people of Ubuntu, going to preserve this language? How are we going to make sure that the infection is removed and it does not continue to be infected further, right? Kiswahili was originally, as presented and as the evidence has shown, created by different Bantu-speaking peoples. We at Jumuiya ya Nguzo Saba and our friends and other Africans who are working with us are proposing that as we return to our African language of unity, which was meant to evolve as time goes by, we should start bringing in other African languages from all over Africa, right? Bring in languages from West Africa, bring in languages from North Africa, not Arabic, I must emphasize. Bring in other African languages so that it feels more inclusive and more something that is theirs that they can relate to. I was talking to someone the other day and they told me a word in Akan and it has K-Y-A and they said cha. I said, wait a minute, what did you say? Cha, K-Y-A, cha. I said, that's the same thing we say in Kikamba. In Kikamba, if I have K-Y-A-L-O, which is a name Chalo, we say Chalo, K-Y-A. So similarity between peoples who are in Afrika Mashariki and the peoples who are in the West, but using the same phonology, the same speech patterns. So as Kiswahili continues to evolve, we can start bringing in words, taking away the infection, taking away the hamsini, taking away the Arabic and bringing in words from other African languages. The Kiswahili should be the language of interacting across Africa in trade, spirituality, social activities, security, and defense. I know there are going to be presentations talking about doing business in French and whatever other language. No. And I will say, and this is not being said to criticize. This is being said to point out how we can do better. I was very disappointed when first invited to speak that Kiswahili was not listed in the languages that were given for today, right? While English, Portuguese, French were there. English, Portuguese, and French should find no place in any African event before Kiswahili is there. So we at Jumuiya ya Nguzo Saba suggest that we use these foreign languages only in cases where we are interacting with these peoples who originally speak these languages. And in situations where Africans are gathering with them as the hosting party, and I'll side note there, we need to start being the hosting party when it comes to these talks of Africa being the future, right? Africa having the resources, Africa having the youth resources, the youngest people, the most youngest people in the world. If they want to talk to us about our value, they need to start coming to the continent to do that. We need to stop going to their homes to talk about our value. And when they do come, we will speak in Kiswahili and they will get translators to help them understand what we are saying. The future of the African Languages Conference. Again, my sisters and my brothers, I thank you very much for putting this together. But I must say this, I cannot be a defender of African languages if I don't say this. How can we do better? We hope that in the years to come, the African Languages Conference will only have African languages and Africans showcased, right? We cannot have others continue to speak to us about our cultures. I know there's going to be a presentation about translations and what the standards of translations are. The standard cannot be Western. We are Africans, we're translating our languages. We know them best. Westerners cannot tell us how to translate. If they're not happy with the translation, oh well, right? It is how we see it, not how they tell us we should see it. And this includes descendants of those who invaded our motherland and settled as if the land belonged to them. There are many African languages that we would like to learn more about. I don't want to hear about French and Portuguese before I hear about Wolof. I don't want Wolof to not have a chance to speak today. I don't want Giriama to not have a chance to speak today and French has a chance to speak today. I hope that this conference continues to focus on those languages instead of the languages of those who invaded and colonized our peoples. Kiswahili stayed alive in Congo. Let's take away that rumor that it died there, right? Given our belief that Kiswahili has remained the purest, devoid of foreign influence in the region of Congo, where they still count in terms of 10 twos, 10 threes, makumi mane, makumi matano, and so on. We seek to do further research, Jumuiya ya Nguzo Saba, to uncover this true history and reclaim our language, removing all the infection from it that may separate us from our African being. Again, language is the vehicle to culture, culture is the vehicle to spirituality. All three, that is our African being. This effort in reclaiming our culture and unity as African peoples across the globe through Kiswahili will require financial support from the community. So we as Jumuiya ya Nguzo Saba are reaching out to our community, asking that you support. We are on LinkedIn. The links are there. We are on email. The link is there. Our website is coming up soon, so look out for that. We're on Zelle, Cash App, PayPal. Support the work. Again, the hashtag is Changia Kazi Muhimu. Asanteni.
Very, very powerful presentation. I mean, we could feel you speaking from your heart, and I think sometimes we need to have these uncomfortable conversations. We don't have to always smile with each other, but we have to also say the things that could hurt, and that would help us to move forward. So thank you so much for that. It's time for Q&A. So please, if you want to ask a question, you can raise your hand. I would give you the floor, or you can also ask a question. Okay, I can see Elonge has raised his hand, so I'm going to give him the floor to talk. You can go ahead, Christian.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Adi. I think it's more about a contribution that, the conversation that, and most of the points that Nduku have raised are very, very important to reflect on. I think it's all about our self-image. How do we perceive ourselves? Because the nature and the extent to which we develop our languages is directly connected to our self-perception. So it's very important for us to change our mindset about who we are, know our history, and this will help us to really value the languages that we have and not try, to mimic, or to follow the standard that are instituted by other culture or civilization. But now, one of my key questions, one of the key thing I believe, is aside Kiswahili, there are many other African languages which are being spoken across Africa. All of them do not have the same level of development, the same level of codification, the same level of advancement, basically. So it's very important, as Nduku has suggested, to have this like I'm just doing an implication for what she said, to have one African language that will be spoken across all Africa. And doing it now will now enable all of us to have at least one common denominator which we can use across any nation in Africa and across the world. Imagine a scenario where you see an African being in Russia and he meets another African from Tanzania or from South Africa or from any part of Africa. They may not know the national language that they are each speaking, but at least they should have this common denominator of being able of speaking at least Swahili, which I believe currently is one of the most advanced language in terms of scientific literature and documentation. Nduku could kindly confirm that. Is there any other language that is more developed in terms of learning resources, in terms of codification than Kiswahili? Then if that's the case, I think it could be good to envisage that. The second question is concerning the technological development of our languages. So if Nduku could share, what are the recent technological progress apps or resources that is the learning of Kiswahili, especially online, by people from anywhere, because one of the key barriers in adopting and using many African languages is the fact that learning material are not quite easy to find, and it make it difficult for people to actually learn the language. If I take the case of Ghana, for example, I'm here for almost 8 years, and my ability of expressing myself fluently in the main language here is Twi, is not quite best, and one of the main barriers is the lack of access to online resources where you can really, in a qualitative way, learn the language, as it is for other Western languages. And learning centers also are not that quite much. So we really need to have more advocates, to stand out and push. And thirdly, my final contribution, this is a direct question. Nduku, Miss Nduku, do you, in terms of policy implementation, most of the African government are all aware of the direct connection between language and development. But when it comes to the actualization of that, it actually takes some challenges. I remember Cabo Language Services, we had a talk where we were discussing what can be practically done to enhance the economic value of our languages. People learn a language when there is economic benefit to it. So what economic benefit do you see our government should put in place to encourage, or enforce the use of our African languages? Do you see a scenario where, for example, if you come to Ghana, it is instituted that if you have to work in a Ghanaian company, you have to speak, a Ghanaian language? Because when you go outside, that's usually the case. Do you see our government moving in that direction? And what are the challenges that you envisage? Thank you.
So again, we're being honest with each other so that we can find solutions. African leaders are not serving Africans. African leaders are not serving us. So, which is why they have not chosen our African language to be the language of unity, right? Which is why they have not followed Nkrumah's advice, which is why they worked with the West to kill the Africans who stood for us, right? Let's be honest with each other. African leaders are not working for Africa right now. Very few of them are. And by that, I'm talking about Burkina Faso, that small region of the nations that are now uniting against Western entities. And even then, I'm skeptical. I want to see more evidence of them and their actions standing by us and working for us. But currently, African leaders are not leading for Africans. They're leading for the West. They're serving the West. And in service of the West, they're accommodating Western languages and not African languages. That is just the plain truth. When they stop serving the West, then they can serve us and uphold our languages. Is Kiswahili a language of commerce? Is it an economic language? It will be when we make it. That's the only thing that has stopped it, that we haven't made it. If English is a language of commerce, Kiswahili can be a language of commerce. I have gone to the market and spoken to the market ladies in Kiswahili, and we did business. We did business. I got what I wanted and they got what they wanted. I've gone to get my hair done back at home and I spoke Kiswahili and we did business. So yes, Kiswahili is a language of an economic language as long as we take it and we see it as ours and we start using it, teaching it, and holding it and preserving it.
All right, then please, your final words.
So my final words from today on, please, first of all, share this video because the idea is to get the message to Africans, wherever they may be, so that they can get this news, right? Breaking news, Kiswahili is a Bantu language. Breaking news, someone else has raised their hand. Breaking news, Kiswahili is not Arabic. Breaking news, Kiswahili should be spoken by all Africans. Share the presentation for that reason.
All right, thank you. Kennedy, you have the floor. Unmute yourself and speak. Kennedy.
Hello.
Habari gani Bosire?
Habari yako?
Niko mwema nawe.
Okay, so I just wanted to ask quickly, in your research, probably you know how many now countries are teaching Kiswahili, and their institutions of learning. Not that they may have a majority of the people speaking it, but how spread is Kiswahili? Is Kiswahili being like studied in European universities, Asian universities, America? Anything you can tell us about that?
The sad thing is that those who invaded our lands are interested in learning Kiswahili more than we do, right? That's the sad truth of the matter. When you go to these classes in the diaspora, you'll find white people sitting in those rooms and not as many Africans. That's the sad truth of the matter. I know, Christian, you had asked about where you can find resources. Jumuiya ya Nguzo Saba is currently teaching Kiswahili. We're going to also have asynchronous sessions. You can find us on abibitumi.com. I put the link there before. I'll put it in there again, abibitumi.com. Abibitumi is Twi for Black Power. The Black Power Language Institute, Abibitumi Language Institute in Ghana, and they have a space where you can learn different African languages, including Kiswahili. Currently, Jumuiya ya Nguzo Saba is teaching there. But yes, I know South Africa at one point had made it official that they're going to start teaching. I don't know how much that is being enforced, but I would like to see it more throughout Africa.
Okay, thank you very much. Unfortunately, we have to close because we have to start the next session. So if you have any questions, please, you can reach out to the speaker. Thank you so much for this session, and see you all at the next session if you are able to make it. Thank you so much. Have a nice day.
You too,
Bye.
kwaherini.
All right.